now with Leah, who was at the Sydney Rally for Freedom on Saturday, the 5th of September. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Carol, I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. You had a pretty amazing day yesterday, and you live streamed a lot of it to Instagram, which was wonderful. I've only watched part of that so far. I'm going to have to watch the whole thing soon. But what was your impression of the people who were there yesterday? Were they I mean, how did they respond to being there? Was there a great spirit, or was there a lot of confusion, or how did it work?
Yeah, we when we arrived, there was a crowd gathered. Not an enormous crowd as you would have seen in the live. It felt a little bit like there was some confusion there, and a lack of cohesion because obviously I didn't know who was organizing it, and it didn't seem like there was anyone necessarily doing anything. So people had kind of just stood around in the park. Um, but in saying that, whenever anyone did try and speak, we noticed very quickly that the police would come and swoop in and take them away.
So any speakers were instantly removed by the police. Were they arrested and sent to a holding cell, or do you know anything about
Well,
what happened?
this is the interesting part. So, you might have seen in the live Michael O'Neill from IMOP was there, and I believe he was taken away after he did a little happy laugh. Um,
I heard, and I'm going to be speaking with Nadine later, and I think she might have some footage of that too.
Great. Yeah, well, he was taken away. It appeared that they were arresting people, and then when it came to light later on, when we had our own experience with this, it came to light that this was not actually the case. So it seemed to be that they were putting people under arrest, taking them away, and discontinuing the arrest.
So arresting and then unarresting. I wonder what part
Yes.
of the law covers that. That's interesting. So tell me a little bit about your personal situation with this arresting, unarresting thing.
Yeah, so we had gone. So I obviously, if you go to avn.org.au on Instagram, you can see the lives which have been posted there, and you can see what happened. I was there with my husband, and I had a sign, a red sign that I'd taken a bit from the Australian anthem, which said, "For we are young and free." And so I had said to him, "Can you hold this for me?" as I was doing the live. And the next thing I knew, I turned around and he was being taken away. He was being arrested. I then followed, which is very bizarre because he, for all accounts and purposes, he didn't seem to be doing anything. He was just standing in the park. And my husband is a very calm and gentle man. So it was, yeah, very bizarre. And they escorted him off to the side, and I followed and I recorded on my phone on the live. Um, and I said, is he being arrested? They said, yes, being arrested. And I said, what is he being arrested for? And they said something or other around the Public Health Act. And at that point, one of the officers actually said, I'm discontinuing the arrest now, which was something which was really new to me. I've never heard of that happening. And I don't know what grounds they actually had to arrest him in the first place. So I then sort of, yeah, we were quite perplexed. And I then questioned one of the officers saying, what is he, why are you arresting him? And then he had said, yeah, we're discontinuing. The other officer said, um, you need to move on, basically gave the move on order. And I said, what for? And he said, something along the lines of under public health section 4. And I said, so okay, this is about public health, is it? And I said, do you know there's a football game that's happening in 5 minutes?
The irony.
Very much so. And I questioned him and really put it to him, saying, so you're telling me that we're here being, escorted off the premises because it's about health for a public health act, yet there's a football game occurring. And I said, are you not going to go to the football game and tell them to leave then? And he then said, no, football's exempt. To,
You see, Leah, it's a scientific fact that coronavirus cannot possibly infect you inside of a football stadium, but outside of the football stadium, it is so active. The
it
irony is
seems,
just
oh, and
incredible.
another thing that was interesting about something I didn't know about COVID is apparently it hits circle formations. So people
Oh,
started walking in a circle, and the police formed like a, well, human slash horse barricade across the park that we were in, preventing people from walking in a circle. It was very bizarre.
did they give a
Yeah,
reason for that? Did they say why you couldn't walk in a circle?
no, no. Look, most of the police, the vibe was different to when we went to Hyde Park a while ago.
Oh,
And
so
I
you
will
were
say,
at both events.
no, not yesterday, but the Hyde Park event, which
Ah.
occurred whenever it was a while ago. The police were quite friendly and cooperative, but the definitely it had changed. The attitude in general had changed. I can't speak for every single police officer there. I did have a friendly conversation with one towards the end, but it seemed that they were very much not in the mood for conversation. They were, yeah, they were amped up, ready to arrest people and take people away. And there was not one person that I saw being aggressive or violent or anything. So it was really quite bizarre. It seemed quite disproportionate. And even the amount of police that were there was, yeah, quite strange. But I did say to the officer, um, he actually said to me, this is an organized public gathering. And I said to him, well, is the football not an organized public gathering? And he was exempt. So he was quite young. I think he was under pressure too. But we then, following on from that, we had a conversation. I was trying to ask him some more questions, and he was saying, "I'm going to arrest you." And I said, "I'm just trying to ask you a question. Can you think about this? Because really, you're acting under your own volition. Like, this is your choice." And because he kept saying, I'm acting under this law, I'm acting under this law. And I said, but you need to realize that you need to act under your, I did say under your brain, which turned out to be a bit of a catchphrase for the day, apparently. Act under your brain. um, yeah, it seems like they didn't really know and understand what they were doing.
No, I actually learned something yesterday that I'd never known before. I always kind of thought that police officers, when they do things like this, are just following orders, but they actually have very broad latitude. They have the
Yeah.
ability to make a decision at the time as to what they want to do. And the fact that so many police officers yesterday in various locations, especially in Melbourne, were acting so brutal and so
Mm,
horrendous,
mm,
to me means that they either they've trained the humanity out of some of these people or they're selecting the most brutal people to come to these events that you can possibly imagine. But it seems like, did you see any violence on the part of the police yesterday?
there were a few people that were kind of taken down. There was one man, and I didn't actually see it occur, but I did watch someone else's live or video of it. And he had sunglasses on, and they tackled him. But I don't know if he had resisted or anything. But when they had tackled him, they crushed his sunglasses into his face, and he was bleeding.
Wow.
Yeah, so it did seem like a very disproportionate response to what was happening. And particularly, I did mention as well to some of the officers, how do you know who's actually here for the football? There was one man that was actually arrested, or I think he was ended up getting a fine. He was sitting in the park reading a book by himself,
So he
and
just
they
was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
it seems like that, yeah.
That is pretty amazing. So, You said earlier that you didn't know who had actually organized this, and I know that there was a lot of confusion between people going to Hyde Park and people going to the Kathy Freeman Park
Mm.
outside of Olympic Stadium. Is it called Olympic Stadium, or did I get that wrong?
Yeah,
Olympic Park, yeah.
is-
Yeah. So, what my, as someone who's an outside observer, because the AVN was not involved in any of the organization, we were simply helping to promote this, it
Mhm.
seemed to me that there were quite a few new faces that had
Mm.
entered the fray, so to speak, and were sowing confusion, intentionally sowing
Mm. Mm.
confusion on this whole event. And one of the things that really concerns me is how members of our community know who to trust when it comes to things like this, so that in future events this doesn't happen, because having a united front is so important. I think we saw that in Adelaide and Brisbane, where there was good organization, and there were possibly up to 5 or 10,000 in Brisbane, and Adelaide had at least 4 or 5,000 people there, and the police backed off, because I
Mm.
think when there is a large crowd, the police kind of take a back seat. Um, how in the world are people supposed to decide who they're going to believe when it comes to these things? Because so many people are saying, I'm getting so many different statements about where this is going to be. I don't know what to do. Do you have any words of wisdom to that?
I, I can only speak for what I've seen. Obviously, I suppose this whole COVID situation, I feel like it's given rise to a that new movement of freedom. So it's not just about things like the vaccination issue, and which is great. So we've seen a lot of people who have actually started to come out and want their rights and have realized that they're being stripped away. But I think amongst that, we then have a lot of what I would say new kids on the block who maybe haven't been so active before, who can gain a very fast following on across social media, and perhaps haven't had much involvement in organization of things before. And it's not to say that anyone's necessarily had the answers before, or we obviously it's something that we've always struggled with. But personally, I look at it and think to myself, if I'm going to look to leadership or to people in the community to trust, I would look to people who aren't in it for their own reasons. So people who aren't trying to sort of just gain followers, certainly people who actually show up to these events are people
Yes.
that in the community. Because if there are people telling people to go or not to go to certain events and they themselves are at home, it seems a bit strange to me.
Lack of
Yeah, so I
commitment.
really look, yeah, I look to people who have sort of got a kind of a calm view of it. So people like Victor Tay, for example, there's just a authenticity about him, and it's obvious that he has a conviction to do what he's doing, which um, which probably could be quite damaging to him, in respect to his profession and that kind of thing. And so it's not something that people should be looking to for popularity, and I want to follow this person and what they said is gospel, because I think it's really important to be discerning and decipher the information for ourselves and do what feels right. It did feel disappointing, but um, I can't place any blame, because certainly I didn't organize anything. And I think one of the critical issues is that people didn't want to put their hand up as organizers publicly.
Because they'd be
So
arrested.
yeah, because they would, and I completely understand that,
Mm.
because why would you want to get arrested before the event takes place? Then you can't participate. But it lacked cohesion because there was people apparently organizing behind the scenes, but at the same time, there were people telling others to go to Hyde Park. So I spoke to people who actually went to both. and that kind of confusion and sort of division, it breeds distrust,
Yes.
and I think it really confuses people, and I believe a lot of people just ended up not going.
Yeah, and that's the really sad outcome, is that when there isn't a unity, I mean, the whole thing about the freedom rallies is to be united as one. And as you said, it's got nothing to do with vaccination. It's about our rights, our human rights. And everyone should be concerned about that, seeing what's happening in Australia today. And I think a lot of people were just absolutely put off because of this back and forth confusion. It's at Hyde Park, it's at the Olympic Stadium.
Mm.
You know, we don't know what's going on, so we just stay away. And
Yeah,
Melbourne had something very similar, and where that
I
happened.
Victoria situation, sorry to cut you off, but before I forget, I think the Victoria situation actually heavily impacted on the Sydney and other events as well, because it seemed as if people who were organising Australia wide, there was a lot of division and confusion surrounding that. And people then, I believe, thought, well, if this is happening with the Victoria event, like with Melbourne, then what does that mean for our event? And there was talk that I heard going around that ANZ Stadium was actually a trap, that it's a difficult area to get out of, which is understandable actually, because it is an odd area to go to. But I understand as well that I think the premise was, if you organize it there where there's a crowd for a football, then you're pretty safe because there's a public event already happening there.
Mm.
But as we saw, that didn't turn out to be the case, and people were actually herded together by the police, which was ironic because they were telling people that we were there as part of a large crowd, which we weren't, and then they herded people together where they weren't able to socially distance.
And I did notice the police, for the most part, did not wear masks in
Um,
Sydney.
some of them weren't. I have no understanding of whether that was just a personal choice of different officers, but it was very strange that they don't even sort of, yeah, they don't have sort of across the board rules about that kind of thing. And I suppose we're not Victoria, so it's not mandated.
No.
Uh, and some of them weren't. And then, funnily enough, when we were leaving, if you saw my live, I was having great difficulty understanding where I had parked my car. So I was in the area for quite some time after our move on order. Um, and we actually saw one of the officers who had attempted to arrest my husband with his mask pulled down, drinking what do I presume a soft drink from McDonald's. Oh, it's just highlighted to me the absurdity of it all, that these masks are going to prevent transmission and they're so important, and there they are, masks pulled down and touching their masks constantly, some of them. So yeah, very bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. Masks seem to be more of a vector for infection than a preventative for them. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. All in all, what was your feeling from the day? Were you glad that you went, number one?
Definitely, I think it's really important that we don't just talk the talk, but we walk the walk. I think it's super important that we get out there and show people what it means to try and have our voices heard. Whether people thought the event was a success or not, I don't think you can really determine success from numbers. I think simply being there and standing in solidarity with your community is a success in itself. It would have been nice if there was more sort of organisation and cohesion when we were there, but at the same time, it's very difficult to convey from a live feed how people were saying, March, why aren't you guys doing this? Why aren't you guys marching? And anytime anyone spoke up, anytime anyone looked to have one degree of leadership throughout it, they were quickly whisked away, and it was nipped in the bud, which was, yeah, the tactic that the police was using. Um, but yeah, all in all, I'm happy to have gone. The feeling certainly wasn't jubilation. It was a little bit of disappointment, but at the same time, yeah, happy that we went.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I think that rather than looking at what happened in Melbourne and Sydney, perhaps the next time rallies are planned, and there will be rallies planned, I can tell you that much, the people who are planning them should look to what was done in the places like Adelaide and Brisbane and try to emulate that. And we need to come together as a community and not necessarily be so willing to believe people when they say that something's been canceled or something's been moved. Be as discerning about who we listen to with this as we are about who we listen to about medical issues, because not always are we being told the truth, and not always are the people who we are trusting all that trustworthy. So we need to learn to be, I guess, more informed consumers of information when it comes to these issues. So, yeah, is there anything final that you'd like to say, Leah?
Yeah, just on that note, I think too that people can sometimes get caught up on thinking that misinformation is purposefully spread throughout the community. And sometimes, there's words that are thrown around like controlled opposition, and people get very heated about it. I think it doesn't necessarily have to come from a bad place. Like, there are well intentioned people who misinform. And so, like we see within the community of medicos and whatnot, and within all human areas,
Yep.
um, there's mistakes that are made. And so I think rather than attack and target individuals, I think it's really important that we try and inform and educate one another and realize that, yes, some people, unfortunately, there may be people who are purposefully spreading misinformation with malintent. But I think at the same time, we, need to be mindful that sometimes the misinformation that's spread is well intentioned, but we really need to pull it up and highlight it and say, actually, this is not okay.
Yep.
But do so with, yeah, discernment and grace.
Yes, and know who your trusted sources are. Know that the people who've been around for a long time are probably closer to the truth than people who've just suddenly popped up out of nowhere and have 30,000 followers
Yeah.
in a month. So, yeah, it's
Yeah, I mean,
just one of those things.
for myself, I like, on a personal level, obviously, with the Instagram page, it's only recently that people have seen my face, because it wasn't something that I sort of wanted to put myself into, not out of fear of recognition or anything, but just that it wasn't for me and it wasn't about me. But obviously, going there, doing the lives and that kind of thing, you start to see my face pop up. But I think it's a good rule of thumb that if someone's sort of feed or someone's, social media account is more so about them personally, that's when I start to think, I wonder what their intentions are. Is this more of an ego kind of boost for them?
Yep, yep, yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you so much, Leah. I really appreciate it, and thank you for going yesterday and getting out there and doing all that videoing, which is fantastic. So, what again is the Instagram page that the AVN has
So it's avn.org.au.
on Instagram? Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Thank you so much.
And give us a follow.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm here with Nadine Sisterson, who traveled down from Newcastle to Sydney yesterday for the Freedom Rally. Nadine, that's a pretty long trip to make. Did you find the day was worthwhile? Were you glad you went?
I was really glad we went. Obviously, the confusion of locations sort of probably deterred people from coming. Um, However, the turnout was brilliant. There was probably equal amount of people to police,
Wow,
unfortunately. So, as soon as we arrived, the police presence was immense. Just walking from the car park up to Cathy Freeman Park. There were police all along the side of the road. I saw them talking to Joe, who had been at Hyde Park.
that's Smokin'
Um,
Joe?
yep,
Yep.
Smoking Joe. He was having a cuppa, and I went, "Oh, hang on, I saw him get arrested earlier on live footage. Oh, and he's here now." So I went, "Oh, okay, what are we up for now?" just wondering.
Question, you saw him arrested earlier. Was he arrested at Hyde Park or was he, because I saw him arrested at Olympic Park.
He both.
Oh, wow. That's quite a
He
claim to fame.
apparently I didn't hear what he said at the end of being dragged away at Hyde Park, but apparently he had said we're on our way to Olympic Park now. So that could have primarily been a tip off for the police and the riot squad, because the numbers of them, like you would have seen on our footage, we were surrounded. Um, they kept herding us into clusters. Now, when I arrived, though, when I got there, there wasn't very many people. There were a couple of people playing drums, which was really nice and setting like a really great feel. People were just sitting around having picnics. Um, and then I saw one lady and she was very aggressive and she was just like yelling at everyone and anything that walked past her. She had placards all over her, and she was the first person to basically be arrested.
So she was someone supporting the Freedom Rally.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. So she walked over to the people playing drums. She started yelling out all what she needed to say, which was, we need freedom. The government's, you know, this and that. The police were watching. The drumming was going, and then within a couple of minutes, it all, that's when it all just began. It was basically from then on, everyone just came in, and so did the police. So anybody that sparked up saying freedom, freedom, pulled from the crowd,
That's
and
ironic.
they'd just take them to this exit point where they had mounted police, the riot squad. They'd pull them over there and they'd take them down the road. Now, it wasn't until this had gone on for maybe half an hour, a circle had formed and people were just jumping in, talking, having their say. The most amazing one was Michael O'Neill from IMOP, the founder. I was so proud of him. I actually almost cried when I could hear him yelling and chanting and saying this beautiful speech. And then he could see the police came and he just ran out of the circle and around the whole crowd in this, like it was, I don't know if it was Olympic Stadium or what that had brought this beautiful run, but he was off and he had the biggest smile on his face and everyone was just like, yay, supporting him. And then the next thing, he was down and getting taken away. Um,
When you
from
say
that,
he was down, did the police knock him down on the ground? Did they
yeah,
hurt him?
I well, I saw him getting taken away, and he had a big grin on his face. He's
Okay.
like, "I'm okay, I'm all right." Other people where we were, we decided to sit down and create a picnic. Um, because a couple of people I was with, they'd never been to a protest ever in their life, so we were trying to really make it as comfortable and non-threatening as possible. And then we were met with a guy in a tinfoil hat who got put to the ground pretty much on top of us. Um, and he was dragged away. And then when I picked up his belongings, they were left on the ground. I went up to a cluster of policemen and I said, "Excuse me." And they turned and looked at me and I said, "Oh, this man that you've taken away, his belongings are here. Would you like them?" And they said, "No, just leave him on the bench. He'll be back." And I thought, "Oh, he'll be back? Okay, what does that mean?" So a little bit longer goes on, more people are getting pulled out. There's just like mayhem going on everywhere. There's booing, there's yelling of excitement. I've never seen so many people, like women, um, men. I mean, honestly, if a child had yelled out, they would have dragged them off too. I'm pretty sure. Like anyone that spoke out was taken away. It was just incredible. We all started moving. We got up. We were asked to move on. We weren't having a picnic apparently. We were spectators in um, a group that hadn't been given permission. So even though we had picnic stuff everywhere, we were told to move on. And we said, well, we're actually having a picnic. We'd like to remain where we are. And they said, if you don't move, you will all be fined.
Did you ask them why? Is it illegal to have a picnic in the park now?
Well, that's what we said. Is it illegal to have a picnic? No, it's not. However, you can only have groups of 20. And as you can see, there are more than 20 people. And we said, well, we're not with these people. This is our group. There's 10 of us. We're okay. No, you're not okay because you're all sitting here watching around you.
And
Around
everybody
you.
knows if you're
Yes,
watching a group, your COVID is bound to attack you.
that's right. Yeah. So we apparently had immediately become part of the group. Um, Interestingly enough, there were two other picnics happening. Now they didn't get moved. So the rest of us are walking and we start walking, and all of a sudden I see Victor just sort of like pop out of the end of the park.
This
And I
is
went,
Victor
oh my
Tay,
gosh,
right? Victor
Victor
Tay?
Tay.
Yeah.
So I'd been speaking to him earlier and, we had a hug. It's like, oh, hello, how are you going? Um, and within 5 minutes, he was taken away for just walking through the crowd with a camera. But obviously, they knew who he was. They addressed him as Victor. So, yeah, they knew who he was. I said, Victor, are you okay? And he was just smiling. He walked off. He was, he was well equipped to look after himself. But when he appeared at the end of the park, literally 10 minutes later, um, I thought, hang on, what's happening? And I look, and they had a van, and they were taking everyone to this van, issuing their fines, and releasing them back into the crowd. Apparently, they were told if they were found again in the crowd, they would be arrested. Now, every person that was put back in the crowd, they stayed. They didn't, they were like, well, arrest me, see what happens.
And
By
Victor
that
did
stage,
get arrested actually, because I think he was
he
in the lockup until 8 o'clock last night or 8:30, something like that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they arrested him at the very end
Yep.
when they were directing everyone to leave. Everyone started doing circles of the park. We were told you cannot exercise. We were all saying, yes, we can.
It's a
And everyone was social distancing apart. Some people had placards, mostly not. I think people were just, being being respectful that, okay, we're just going to exercise. We're going to be like exercising our rights. Then the mounted police came through and divided the crowd in half. And that's when they had one lot at one end of the park and the other going towards the Olympic Stadium station. So I lost everyone. I was on my own, and the police that had already told me to move on from sitting down found me. And it was actually the third time I'd been told to move on, because I got told to move on with Victor, told to move on from sitting down. Then this time they said, one more time and we will arrest you. We've seen you. And these two men, they seemed to just pop up everywhere that I was. So I said, well, I'm waiting for friends and my husband. They said, ring them. And I said, they don't have their phones. I was the only one with a phone. So I just had to wait it out. I actually just started doing stretches, walking around, just chatting to people, just kept moving. And then finally, my group of people had made their way through. And by that stage, everyone had been brought up to the station and we were in a square. They had us in a holding cell. They were trying to, apparently, they're
When
reasoning the police.
can I ask a question? I don't want to interrupt. When you said everybody had been taken to the station, were they taken to a police station?
No, so sorry, the train station.
Oh, okay.
The police were they were basically blockading us into like where we were going to walk. If you went beyond that, you were taken away and fined. So they were definitely like keeping you in a marching order, and they wanted us all to go down the train station and leave. Um, which didn't happen. Everyone gathered. There were people talking. Um, there was lots of singing, lots of, yelling of freedom. You work for us. You serve us. At that stage, I saw Victor. He was just filming. He didn't talk to anyone. Um, and then everyone basically ended up having to disperse after a good half an hour. We realised in the sky we had the police helicopter. They'd been circling for an hour and a half. So it actually, we weren't there for very long, but it felt like forever. Um, and when they had us at the train station, they brought out a whole nother lot of riot squad. There would have been about 50
When,
came towards us.
when you say riot squad, how do you tell the difference between a normal policeman and a riot policeman?
So the riot police, for one, they had black sort of Jeep style cars. They were all dressed in black. So they had the body protection armor front and back. Um,
As if
all
anyone has guns in Australia to,
Yeah, and
yeah.
then you had your general police just in their blues. Most of the police were masked. By the time we were all leaving, a lot of them had taken their masks off. They were done with it.
They couldn't breathe anymore, right?
No, they they were over it. But again, when they had everyone cordoned off, I actually stood between two policemen with a friend of mine, and we could hear their radio calls coming in. And one of the calls coming in was like, "Can you just get rid of them already? Get them into the station and get rid of them."
Right.
And this young policeman, he just said, "Oh my God," because everyone started heading his way. And it might have been his first day on the job with a mass of people, but a lot of them seemed quite scared, the police, to be honest. I don't think they really knew what to do with so many people. But as I said from the beginning, we had some people infiltrating, very aggressive.
Do you think that woman with the sign, the first woman you talked about, did anyone know her? Was she someone who you think may have been
Never seen
sent
her
there?
before. I've
Yeah.
never seen her ever. But I mean, from 20 years of going to rallies, 20 years plus, you get to see certain people. And obviously, in the non-vax movement, there's your regular people you see. Obviously, now we've got a whole different group of people that are coming out that are coming at it from all different angles. It's not just vaccination or 5G. It really has come down to human rights and seeing what's happening in Victoria, and not wanting that to be here. So there was definitely a lot of people I've never ever seen before.
But when you said that people were infiltrating, do you think that this person was an agent provocateur that was just sent there to cause trouble, or do you think it's just someone a little
I
bit
guess
perhaps off?
I guess when I say infiltrating, for me, in saying that, it was more these people coming along just wanting to create, um, a bit of violence, a bit of unrest, a bit of anger, and not wanting to keep it peaceful. As I said, everyone was sitting down having a picnic. People wanted a peaceful time.
Did,
And then when that started, it just led to the police being basically on the left foot with everyone.
did you see that woman again after she got taken away when you first got there?
Actually, no, she was gone.
I wonder if they did arrest her then and take her to
Yeah.
a station. Um, it is interesting how Melbourne and Sydney went, and one has to wonder if there had been a larger crowd, like the crowds that were in Brisbane and the crowd that was in Adelaide and Perth. Perth was also fantastic. If there hadn't been so much confusion over the venue, if there would have been a larger crowd, and if a larger crowd would have meant that the police would have stood back a bit more. The fact that there were so many police, and I've seen some videos from Melbourne that are quite shocking, with the police basically hedging people in and stepping in and arresting them one by one after they'd locked them in a group. One has to wonder if there wasn't so much confusion,
Yeah.
that there would have been a larger crowd and the day would have gone quite differently. But all in all, it sounds, and from the videos I've seen, it looks like there was quite a good feeling of camaraderie amongst those who were there. And
Definitely.
yeah, the police perhaps overreacted.
Mm.
I know you probably don't know the answer to this question, but do you think that policemen are aware of the law? Do you think that they know what the law says? Because they are acting illegally doing what they're doing. And do you think they're aware of that?
I actually don't think they are. I
Mm.
mean, the we had two riot police come to us to move us on, and they had to read it from a piece of paper, and even then they stumbled. So, and they said it was a law, and luckily one of the people I was with, he knows a lot about law. So he said, "What do you mean a law? That's not a law, that's a directive. We're not doing anything wrong here." And they said, "Look, come on, we know what you're doing. You're, you're being unlawful. You need to move on or we'll arrest you." And we all of us were like, "Hang on a minute, what? Like, how do you know what we're doing here? You
They're
know,
imagining your intent, and they're not allowed to
yeah,
do that.
no."
Mm.
And one incident that happened once I left, I got separated from a very dear friend, and I was quite concerned about her. I couldn't contact her. Um, I was calling, I was messaging her, and she was just uncontactable. So we stayed around, and we actually went into a bar. We thought we really deserve a drink after today. We'd all done so well. So in that time, we just kept seeing the police circling. And strangely enough, we had the same police come past us that had moved us on, that had also told me to move on again later. And here they were, they just kept circling where we were and watching us. Um, we kind of made a bit of a joke of it, like, oh, well, we obviously made an impression, but they were definitely manning the area, making sure that protesters had left.
And you were
Um,
inside of a bar at that point. You were not even at the park.
we were just sitting out on the pavement at a chair, having a drink, being patrons of a bar, and they just kept coming past and coming past. Um, and then when I finally got in contact with my friend, she had been detained by police. Her autistic daughter was arriving back into Sydney Olympic Park. They had accommodation. They were staying there for a few days. She had some business that she was doing, and her daughter, who's 18, was due to come in. While she was talking to her, the police said, "You need to move on." Um, and she said, "I'm waiting for my daughter." And so they said, "Well, you need to wait over here." So she kept moving to where they wanted her to go, and they weren't satisfied. She had four men grab her, twist her arms behind her back, grab her arms, and she said, "Just let go of me, I'm moving." Meanwhile, all of her belongings have fallen on the ground. Her daughter's on the phone hearing her mother being manhandled quite brutally. And it resulted in them fining her for not moving on. Um, she sat on a chair, she got issued her fine, um, and then they were going to issue her another fine because her fine blew off and landed on the ground, and she wasn't quick enough to pick it up, so they were going to fine her with littering.
It's absurd.
Um,
Did they actually give her that second fine?
no, they didn't. No,
And is
she
she planning on fighting that fine without
definitely,
paying it? Yeah.
definitely, yeah, she would like to take each police to court,
Yep.
because when I spoke to her, she was so badly bruised. She had tingles all through her hands, like she wasn't in a good way, and she she's not in the best of health. She's suffering from breast cancer, and so in a very sort of frail condition as well. That um, anyone manhandling her would tip her body in a very stress response.
Yep.
So, but when her daughter finally arrived, she was an absolute mess. You know, just not knowing how her mum was going to be, what state she was going to be in, the fact that she could hear her mum being manhandled. Um, it was just disgusting.
It's abusive.
Um,
It's crazy.
it is. And, just for a female to be treated that way by four male police
Yeah, very
officers,
brave.
and she's doing what she's being told to do. She's moving. Um, and this apparently, she said around her, she saw Joe get arrested, she saw Victor getting taken away. It was all happening as everyone was dispersing. So they just were grabbing people and making more fines and more arrests. So
Right, right.
I just, I find it very, very sad that as a society, um, we're losing our faith in the police as being people like us. They all have families, they all have someone to go home to. Yet they looked at all of us with absolute, like, none of them looked at you nicely. It was just absolute hatred, like you were going to do something really bad. Um, and that makes me really sad that how do you feel safe? You know, you did not feel safe at all. You felt completely intimidated.
Do you think that
Um,
people will start to lose respect for the rule of law when those who are meant to enforce it are
hmm.
actually breaching the law themselves?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I saw a lot of people just in disbelief at what was happening. I actually was very, very glad that my son wasn't there, because I think he would have been extremely distressed to see so many police and seeing them just grabbing people left, right, and centre. Um, there were people just walking along with a sign, taken, taken away. And you're going, this doesn't even make sense. It makes no sense apart from intimidation.
It's not Australia, is
Um,
it? It's not what we expect from
no,
our country.
I, there was one point that I got a bit teary and I went, I'm just ashamed to be Australian right now. Like, if this is what our country does to its own people, I never thought in my life I would see this happen. Um, but then surrounded by the people that you're with that are in the same position, it was so empowering to just flip that back over and go, hey, you know what? This is bloody awesome. If more people could get over their fear of those policemen and police women, because the women were absolutely horrible, the police women, the way they approached people, um, we'd win this, like we'd be heard if more people hit the streets. I just think yeah, we need to do this more often. Um, and we need to do it in solidarity and unity and not have this confusion over locations. Get rid of the ego.
Yep.
Okay. Like, who cares who organizes it? Who cares? You're not going to get a medal at the end of it from all of us going, oh, wow, you're amazing. Let's just do it. Let's do it. Be cohesive. Stay in the same spot. Brisbane and Adelaide prove that. They just had, there was no division. I guess Melbourne and Sydney, they've always led the way in not liking not liking each other, or having to have a power struggle. So unfortunately, that created, I think, the events that happened for both states. I mean, Victoria, different level, being in late level 4 lockdown, but um, yeah, we need to unite.
Yeah,
We
we do.
can't be separate.
We do.
Yeah.
I agree. Is there any last thing that you'd like to share with the people who are going to be watching this?
I I just like people to, find that courage, be brave. Remember, if we do not do anything now, we've got nothing to stand for. And our little people, whether you've got little people or not, they need us. They really, really need us. And I tell you what, like, I'm not going to sit back on my hands and let my son and all the children I care for know that I've done nothing. So, yeah, that's harsh words, but have a conscience, realize what's going on, get over your fear. Who cares if you get fined? Who cares if you get arrested? It's not going to stop you from getting a loan or whatever. Who cares? At the end of the day, you've stood up for something that is so important, because we will not have any freedoms the way it's going, all
Exactly.
because of something that's all made up
Well
and not
said.
lived.
Well
So
said.
find it, people. Join us.
Thank you so much, Nadine. I really appreciate your sharing that with us. Thank you.